Mediator looked across the table at my daughter and her husband and asked one simple question. Did either of you visit your father-in-law during his hospitalization? My son-in-law, Brent, shifted in his chair. My daughter, Lydia, straightened her blazer. We were in the middle of a home renovation, Lydia said. The contractors were already scheduled. The mediator, a small woman named Mrs. Ochoa with reading glasses on a beaded chain, set down her pen. She looked at Lydia the way a teacher looks at a student who has just said something genuinely embarrassing. Your father had a stroke, she said, and you stayed home for the contractors. It wasn't just contractors, we had permits filed, inspections. Miss Lydia, Mrs. Ochoa's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I'm going to ask you to stop talking for a moment. The room went quiet. Through the window, I could see the parking lot of the mediation center, the flat Ohio sky, a woman pushing a stroller past a row of parked minivans. Ordinary life going on, completely indifferent to the fact that my daughter was about to discover how badly she had miscalculated. Mrs. Ochoa turned to me. Mr. Callahan, she said, would you like to explain what you submitted? I think the documents speak for themselves, I said. She almost smiled. Almost. My name is Lloyd Callahan. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a civil engineer for the city of Columbus, Ohio, retired with a decent pension, and made some careful investments over the years that added up to more than most people would guess looking at me. I drive a 10-year-old Ford F-150. I buy my jeans at Costco. I have a vegetable garden in the backyard and a rescue dog named Biscuit who sleeps at the foot of my bed. I am not a complicated man, but I am a patient one. And patience, as it turns out, is a kind of power that people underestimate until it's too late. Lydia is my only child. Her mother, Carol, passed away from ovarian cancer 11 years ago when Lydia was 29. After that, it was just the two of us, and I'll admit I held on maybe a little tighter than I should have. I helped them buy their first house, $47,000 toward the down payment on a 4-bedroom colonial in Dublin, Ohio, a suburb that had gotten expensive fast. I told myself it was what Carol would have wanted. Then came Brent. Brent Holloway had the kind of confidence that comes not from accomplishment, but from never having been told no. He sold commercial real estate, which he described as deal-making at scale, and he wore watches that cost more than my first car. He wasn't cruel exactly. He was just oriented entirely toward himself, like a plant that only grows toward one light source. Lydia changed around him. Gradually, then all at once, the woman who used to call me every Sunday, who made Carol's lemon pound cake every Christmas, who cried at nature documentaries, that woman got quieter and quieter. What replaced her was polished and little distant, like a showroom version of my daughter. About 4 years ago, they started having financial trouble. Brent's deals weren't closing the way they used to. The house needed a new roof. Their daughter, my granddaughter Abby, was at a private school that cost $19,000 a year. They came to me. I didn't hesitate. I gave them $400-500 a month. I told myself it was temporary, until Brent got back on his feet. It became permanent. Over 3 years, I transferred $162,000 into their joint account. I didn't track it at the time. I'm not proud of that. I think some part of me didn't want to see the number. Carol had always said I avoided conflict the way other men avoided vegetables, and she wasn't wrong. It was easier to write the check than to ask the hard question, which was, are these people taking care of me, or am I taking care of them? The answer arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. I was in the backyard raking leaves. Yes, in March, Ohio had given us a late-season dump of wet maple leaves when something went wrong. I can't fully describe it. It felt like someone had reached into the left side of my brain and turned a dial. My arm went numb. I sat down on the ground without meaning to. Biscuit came over and put his head in my lap, which is the only reason I didn't panic completely. My neighbor, a retired teacher named Wendell, saw me from his fence line and called 911. The paramedics were there in 6 minutes. I had a TIA, a transient ischemic attack, what some people call a mini-stroke. It resolved on its own before I got to the hospital, but the doctors wanted to keep me for 4 days of observation, tests, medication adjustments. They told me I needed someone with me at home for at least 2 weeks afterward. I called Lydia from my hospital room. "Dad, we're in the middle of getting the kitchen redone," she said. The cabinetry is being installed this week. We can't just leave." "I'm not asking you to move in," I said. "I just need someone to check on me, drive me to follow-up appointments, help me with the dog." There was a pause. In that pause, I heard the whole truth of the last 4 years. "Can't you ask Wendell," she said, "or see if the hospital has a discharge service?" I hung up. I lay in that hospital bed for a while looking at the ceiling. The TV was on with the sound off. A cooking show. Someone was decorating a cake with a technique that required a lot of patience and a very small spatula. I called my attorney, a sharp woman named Monica Varga, who had done my estate work for years. I told her what had happened. She didn't say anything dramatic. She just said, "Okay, let's talk about what you want to do." What I wanted to do was think. So that's what I did for the 4 days I was in the hospital, with Wendell bringing me crossword puzzle books and Biscuit waiting at home. I went home by myself in a cab. I hired a home health aide through an agency, a kind, no-nonsense woman named Patrice, who had worked with stroke patients for 15 years and made the best sweet potato soup I've ever tasted. I paid her out of pocket, $22 an hour, which was worth every cent. The first check I didn't send to Lydia and Brent went unnoticed for about 10 days. Then my phone rang. "Dad, the transfer didn't come through." "I know." Silence. "Is there a problem with your bank?" "No." A longer silence. "Dad, we have bills." "Lydia, I had a stroke, or close enough to one that the doctors kept me for 4 days. You didn't come." I explained that. "The contractors." "Yes." I let that sit for a moment. "I'm not sending the money anymore. I should have stopped a long time ago." She didn't yell. That surprised me. She just said, "I see," in a voice that was very controlled, and then she hung up. What followed was a kind of siege. Brent called 3 times that afternoon. I let it go to voicemail. His messages went from friendly, "Hey Lloyd, just checking in, thought maybe there was some confusion," to pressured, "We need to discuss this as adults. I think there's been a misunderstanding," to something that wasn't quite a threat, but had the same temperature as one. "You're making a serious mistake here, and I think you'll regret pulling back from your family over a temporary financial disagreement." Lydia texted. Long texts, carefully written, full of the language of therapy, boundaries, communication, needs, deployed in the service of telling me that my needs were less important than their mortgage. I saved everything. Then, 6 weeks later, Lydia filed a petition in Franklin County Probate Court to have me declared legally incompetent. Monica called me the morning it was served. "They've submitted a statement from a physician," she said, "claiming your TIA indicates cognitive decline that makes you unable to manage your own financial affairs." I sat with that for a moment. "Who's the physician?" "Someone named Dr. Pryor. Do you know him?" "Never heard of him." I paused. "Lydia has a friend from college who became a doctor. Goes by Chit. I've met him once at a barbecue." That would be consistent with the signature. Monica's voice was dry. "This is going to be straightforward, Lloyd. I want you to know that." The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday in May. I spent those weeks being systematically competent. I took every test Monica suggested. Neuropsychological evaluation, I scored in the 91st percentile for men my age. Cognitive assessment, normal. A letter from my actual physician, Dr. Butt Ramirez, who had been my doctor for 14 years and found the whole thing deeply insulting on my behalf. Financial records showing that my accounts were in excellent order, that I had been managing my investments independently and well for decades. I also changed my will. Not vindictively, thoughtfully. Everything that would have gone to Lydia now goes into a trust administered by Monica, with Abby as the eventual beneficiary when she turns 25. There's a provision for Abby's college education, paid directly to the institution. Lydia gets nothing until she can demonstrate for 5 consecutive years that she's conducted herself with basic human decency. The standard is mine to judge. Monica thought that last part might not hold up, but she put it in anyway. The hearing itself was almost anticlimactic. The judge was a man in his late 50s named Judge Harmon, with reading glasses and the expression of a man who had seen every variety of family dysfunction and was no longer surprised by any of it. He reviewed the documents. He asked Lydia's attorney some questions. He asked Brent directly why they hadn't visited during my hospitalization. "We had prior commitments," Brent said. "What kind of commitments?" "Home renovation, scheduled contractors." Judge Harmon looked at Brent the way you look at something you found on the bottom of your shoe. "Mr. Holloway," he said, "your father-in-law experienced a neurological event requiring hospitalization. Your response was to continue supervising your kitchen remodel." Brent started to answer. The judge raised one hand. "I've read the neuropsychological evaluation. I've read Dr. Ramirez's letter. I've reviewed 14 years of financial records." He set the papers down. "This petition is denied. Mr. Callahan is entirely competent. Furthermore, the medical statement submitted in support of this petition raises serious questions about its legitimacy, and I'm referring it to the Ohio Medical Board for review." Lydia's attorney tried to say something. The judge looked at him. "We're done, counselor." The gavel came down. Outside the courthouse, Monica squeezed my arm. "I told you it would be straightforward." "You did." "They'll owe your legal costs. $9,400. The order will go out this week." "They don't have $9,400. "No, but that's a problem they made for themselves." I drove home. It was a Thursday afternoon in May, which in Columbus means the air smells like cut grass and someone nearby is always mowing. I drove with the windows down and Biscuit in the back seat with his head hanging out, ears blown flat, completely unconcerned with the legal system or its outcomes. My phone began buzzing before I got off 270. 17 texts from Brent, 11 missed calls, a voicemail from Lydia that I didn't listen to until I was home and sitting on the back porch with a glass of iced tea. "Dad." Her voice was different from what I expected, not rage, something more like the sound a person makes when the ground is moved under them. "I don't understand why you're doing this to us. We're your family. Everything we've been through, Mom dying, all of it, and you're going to let some lawyer turn you against us? Call me, please. We need to talk about this before it gets any worse." I set the phone down. I thought about Carol, what she would have said. She would not have said forgive them immediately. She was not a woman who confused forgiveness with ignoring what was real. She would have said, "Lloyd, you spent 4 days in a hospital alone because your daughter didn't come. Whatever comes next, you need to remember that." I remembered. The weeks after the hearing were quiet in the way that a room is quiet after something heavy has fallen. Wendell kept me updated on neighborhood things. Patrice came twice a week still, mostly because I liked her company and she didn't mind Biscuit. I worked on the garden. I had a follow-up with Dr. Ramirez, who pronounced me irritatingly healthy for a man my age and told me to lay off the salt. Through Abby, I got bulletins. Abby was 13. She was the kind of kid who notices everything and says half of what she notices, which is a quality I recognize because Lydia had been that way too once. She called me one evening in June. "Grandpa, Mom and Dad are fighting again. I can hear it through the walls. Are you okay, sweetheart?" "Yeah, I'm in my room with headphones, but I can still hear them." She paused. "Mom keeps saying it's your fault, but Dad said something weird. He said maybe they shouldn't have taken the money in the first place." "That surprised me. He said that?" "Yeah." Then Mom yelled at him and he stopped talking. Another pause. "Grandpa, why did you used to give them money?" I thought about how to answer that, honestly. "Because I loved your mom," I said, "and I thought it would help. But sometimes helping isn't the same as helping." "That's kind of confusing." "It is. I'm sorry." "It's okay. Can I come visit? I miss Biscuit." "Anytime you want. Just say the word." By August, the consequences had a shape. Brent's income had been shrinking for 2 years before I stopped the transfers, and without that monthly cushion, the math no longer worked. They'd been carrying revolving credit card debt, I learned this later, nearly $31,000 across 4 cards. The private school tuition was paid through October, but not beyond. Brent asked for a raise at his firm and was told there was a performance review first. The kitchen renovation, the one that had been more important than their father's hospitalization, was half finished and sitting that way because the contractor hadn't been paid the back half of his invoice. Lydia tried to get a personal loan, was declined. She called me in September. The controlled voice was gone. What was left was something raw, which I found both harder and easier to hear. Dad, I don't know what to do. Abby might have to change schools. Brent and I aren't doing well. I'm scared. I stayed quiet for a moment. I'm sorry you're scared, I said, and I meant it. But Lydia, I lay in that hospital bed alone for 4 days. I came home alone. I had to hire someone to take care of me because my daughter was busy with her kitchen. I know, her voice broke slightly. I know, Dad. Do you? Silence. I think I do now, she said. I didn't then. I don't know what I was thinking. I think Brent and I got used to things, to the money being there. It stopped feeling like something you were giving us. It just started feeling like a thing that happened. That was the most honest thing she'd said to me in years. I'm not restoring the transfers, I said. That's done. But I'm also not your enemy. I need you to understand those are two separate things. Okay, she said, in a very small voice. Abby can come stay with me on weekends if she wants. She'd be welcome any time. As for the rest, that's going to take some time. We talked for another few minutes. When we hung up, I sat there with Biscuit's warm weight against my leg and thought about Carol again, about the way she used to say that love and money were always getting confused with each other in families, and once that happened, it took a long time to unsort them. A month later, Brent called, without Lydia on the line, which surprised me. Lloyd, he said, I owe you an apology. I didn't say anything. I let him continue. I know I should have come when you were in the hospital. I know that no excuse is a real excuse for that. I've been telling myself and Lydia a story for years about what kind of people we were, and I think the story was wrong. He paused. I'm not asking for anything. I needed to say that. I appreciate it, I said, carefully. Lydia's been in therapy, he said. So have I. Separate, trying to figure out how we got here. That sounds like a good idea. The money it was too easy. I think it let us avoid growing up in a way we should have grown up a long time ago. Another pause. I'm not blaming you. I want to be clear about that. We made choices, but having that cushion made it easier to make the wrong ones. I thought about that for a while after we hung up. He wasn't wrong. I had made it easier for them to be the worst version of themselves. That was my part in it. I hadn't seen it clearly until I was lying on the ground in my backyard with a dog on my lap and my arm not working right. The private school question resolved itself. Abby tested into a scholarship program at a very good public school, the kind of opportunity she might never have looked for if things hadn't changed. She called me to tell me, her voice lit up in a way I hadn't heard in a while. Grandpa, it's a STEM magnet. They have a robotics team. I already emailed the coach. That's my girl, I said. Mom cried. I think because she was proud, but also maybe because it was free. Probably both, I said. Both is okay. Abby started coming on Saturdays. She'd do her homework at my kitchen table while I made lunch. And then we'd walk Biscuit along the Olentangy Trail, and she'd tell me about school in that 13-year-old way that's a mix of detailed and completely random. She told me about a teacher she liked. She told me about a friend's drama with another friend. She told me her parents were fighting less. Dad said they're working on it, she told me one afternoon, throwing a stick for Biscuit, who ignored it completely because he's never been interested in fetching. I don't totally know what that means. It usually means they're trying, I said, which is the most important part. Are you going to forgive Ma? I watched Biscuit sniff the stick with polite disinterest. That's a complicated question, I said. That's what adults say when the answer is complicated. Well, yes, that's why I said it. She considered this. I think she's sorry. For real sorry. Not like sorry, because she got caught sorry. I think so too, I said. But sorry and forgiven aren't the same thing. Forgiveness takes longer. How much longer? I'm working on it. She nodded. That seemed to satisfy her, which I was grateful for because it was the most honest answer I had. In November, Lydia asked if she could come over for dinner. Just her, without Brent. I said yes. She brought a lemon pound cake, Carol's recipe. I hadn't seen that cake in 8 years. She didn't say anything about it. She just put it on the counter and started helping me set the table, and for a while we moved around the kitchen the way we used to when she was young, when it was just the two of us after Carol died and we were learning how to do ordinary life in the new shape of it. We ate. Biscuit sat between us with his head on his paws, watching with the devoted attention he gives to anyone who might drop food. "I've been thinking about what you said," Lydia said, "about love and money getting confused." I said that? Not exactly, but that was the idea. She poked at her chicken. "I think I stopped seeing you as a person at some point. You became a resource, someone who solved problems, and I let that happen, and Brent made it easy to let it happen, but it was still my choice." "Yes," I said, "it was." "I'm sorry, Dad. I don't mean the kind of sorry that's supposed to fix things. I just mean, I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry you were alone." The kitchen was quiet. Outside, November rain had started, tapping at the window over the sink. "I know," I said. "Are we going to be okay?" I thought about the hospital ceiling, the cooking show, the woman decorating the cake with a small spatula. I thought about Wendell calling 911, about Patrice and her sweet potato soup, about Abby throwing a stick for a dog who will never, ever fetch. "I think so," I said, "but it's going to look different than it used to." "Different how?" "No more transfers. No more being the solution to every problem." I looked at her. "You're my daughter. I love you. But I'm not a financial institution, and I'm not going to pretend I don't have needs because it's easier for everyone if I'm just useful." She nodded. Something in her face settled the way a picture settles when you finally get it level on the wall. "That's fair," she said. We had the cake. It tasted exactly like Carol's. I told Lydia that, and she looked like she might cry, and then she did, a little, and I handed her a napkin and let her be. The will stays as it is. Monica reviewed it again in December and confirmed that everything is structured correctly. Abby's education is protected. The monthly transfers are over and will not come back. My legal costs were eventually collected through a wage garnishment that took 6 months, which I did not enjoy, but the alternative was letting it go, and Monica said that would set the wrong precedent. Lydia and Brent are still married. In marriage counseling, Brent got a better commission quarter and is talking about switching to a different firm. Lydia got a part-time job at an architecture firm doing project coordination. She has a degree she'd barely use, and the work suits her. She sounds more like herself than she has in years, which I think is what happens when people stop outsourcing their stability to someone else. She comes on the second Sunday of every month. We cook. Abby comes on Saturdays. Brent and I have had coffee twice, which is not friendship, but is the beginning of something that might become it. The house on my street doesn't look any different. Costco still has great jeans. Biscuits still won't fetch. The tomatoes are already planning what they're going to do to me come July. I was standing in my garage last week, doing some small maintenance on the F-150, when Wendell came over the fence line the way he does. "How are the kids?" he asked. He always calls them the kids. "Getting better," I said. "And you?" I thought about it. 4 days in a hospital. A petition to have me declared incompetent. A courtroom. 89 missed calls. A daughter who chose her kitchen over her father and then had to find out who she was after the money stopped. "Doing all right," I said, and I meant it completely. Wendell nodded like that was the most sensible thing he'd heard all day and went back to his garden. I went back to the truck. Some things, once you stop letting people take them for granted, become something better than what they were before. Not fixed, exactly, not the same as they were, but real. Earned. Yours. That's worth more than any check I ever wrote. I think about Wendell a lot. A retired teacher who happened to look over a fence at the right moment and called 911. He didn't owe me anything. He just did what decent people do. He paid attention, and he acted. That's it. No calculation, no weighing of cost and convenience. Just a man who saw something wrong and responded to it. My daughter and her husband made a different choice, not because they're monsters. I've had to sit with that for a long time, and it's the truest thing I can say about it. They aren't monsters. They just let themselves get comfortable in a way that quietly hollowed out who they were. The monthly transfers made it easy, and I let it happen because I confused giving money with giving love, and I kept doing it long past the point where the distinction should have been obvious. That's the thing about cause and effect that people don't like to talk about. It doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it just looks like reality finally arriving. Lydia and Brent didn't lose the kitchen renovation money because I was angry. They lost it because they had built a life on a foundation that wasn't theirs, and when that shifted, the whole structure went with it. That's not cruelty. That's just how weight works. What I had to learn. And I'm not proud of how long it took me, is that character isn't just about doing the right thing when it's easy. It's about doing it when it costs you something. Lydia came to me with Carol's lemon pound cake. She didn't ask me to forgive her. She didn't make promises. She just showed up and told the truth, which I think was probably the hardest thing she'd done in years. That took something real. That took the kind of moral seriousness that can't be faked, at least not for long. And Brent, calling me without Lydia on the line, saying he didn't need anything, just that he'd been wrong. A man can fake remorse once. The way he said it, I believed him. The willingness to admit fault without expecting a reward, that's its own kind of intelligence, not book knowledge. The kind that comes from actually looking at yourself and not looking away. As for me, I spent 67 years being a patient man, and I think I confused patience with passivity somewhere along the way. Real patience isn't just waiting things out, it's knowing when to hold still and when to act, and having the spine to do the second one when it matters. That's what I finally found in that hospital bed. Not anger, not revenge, just the clarity that comes when you stop outsourcing your own dignity to people who haven't earned it. I don't know what Lydia and I will look like in 10 years. I don't know if Brent will become the man he's trying to be. I know Abby's going to be fine. I know that the way I knew the F-150 still had good miles left in it just from the sound of the engine. What I know for certain is this. The day I stopped writing that check was the day I started getting my life back. Not as a punishment, as a fact. You can't build something real on what you haven't earned, and you can't keep giving what isn't being received. Once I understood that, everything else followed. Some lessons take a stroke and 4 days alone in a hospital to arrive. I wish mine had come cheaper, but it came, and I'm not wasting it.